Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to another episode of Rickcast Interviews. I'm happy to be joined tonight by Drago Dimitrov. I think I threw an F in there where it wasn't supposed to be. But I'm happy to have Drago on the program with me. We got a lot of great stuff to talk about tonight. Make sure you're going to find, if you don't follow him now, there is going to be a link to his X account and to his YouTube page in the description box down below. There's a bunch of stuff that he's got in the mix, and I just can't wait to jump into it. So, Drago, if you want to take a second to introduce yourself to our audience if they don't know you and kind of give yourself a little bit of background for them.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Rick. Great to be here with you and your audience. I was born in Bulgaria. I grew up in South Bend in the Midwest. Was a Protestant, good old Baptist, and then kind of Methodist, evangelical, low church, and went to the non-Christian school, University of Notre Dame,
Yeah,
because that's what I thought as a Protestant. The Catholics aren't Christians, right?
right.
So God kicked off a journey for me. And then it took me about 5 years to come to the faith, peeling back one layer of onion at the time, because I knew my faith deeply as a Protestant. So it wouldn't be that easy to convert me. But each time I tried to disprove the Catholic Church, because I thought I would know better and I could save the Catholics. I could prove how the Catholics have been deceived. But turns out 2,000 years of tradition and wisdom are around for a reason. And so I kept falling back on my butt every time I tried to do that. And I'm the one, joke's on me, right? So I'm the one who converted in 2016, got married in the Catholic Church in 2018. And yeah, just been doing that, moving and grooving as a Catholic for coming up on a decade. And then professionally, I did the whole investor Wall Street kind of thing, New York City. And then I went to business school, started to get into startups, technology, software, this kind of thing. And I really wanted to do something for the kingdom because, I mean, when I was a Protestant, I wanted to be a pastor. And then
Right.
obviously went in a completely different direction. And so God answered my prayers through being able to merge some of these professional skills I picked up with the passion for the faith. And so now I'm full-time co-founder, CEO of the Holy Habits app, which is a spiritual coaching app for devout Catholics. If you want to become a saint, if you're serious about that, and then also as part of that, some people say, is it the same thing as different? But I'm very active in apologetics. So I do a lot of Catholic apologetics. Whether you're an atheist, whether you're Protestant, whatever it is, I try to walk with you and uncover some of the blind spots because, Rick, as you and your audience knows, we have the fullness of the truth, which is a pretty cool spot to sit in. We're not here trying to figure things out, reinvent the wheel. We already have the truth. It's just like figuring out how to deliver that to people in a way that lands. So here we are.
Yeah, for me, it's kind of making sure I don't, get. I don't. For me, I describe myself as a medieval or back pew Catholic, i.e., where I try not to overthink a lot of the
Mm.
stuff. The truth is there, and you don't want to be one of these people. I can't. I've been a person that has thought myself into more bad situations than out thought myself.
Mm.
As far as that, and it sounds like this is a great thing. Let me get the first question. I'm sure you get when you talk about the Holy Habit app. When you're out there, how is it different than Hollow?
Yeah, this is a great question, and so Hallow, great app. I mean, what they've done has been phenomenal. More people praying than ever, right? In the modern era. But what I would say, and look, like with Hallow, they're top of the funnel, right? I mean, when people could even just be a little curious about Catholicism, half of the users, more or less, are Protestants, and they have some
Mm,
great Protestant people on there as well. Some of the pastors. So what I would say is like it's the difference between, hey, like I'm kind of getting into this, and and granted there are deeper things in Hallow as well, but really it's the difference between, hey, I kind of want to get into working out versus no, I'm going to work out. I have my system. Here's my reps. I'm going to track the calories, the macros, the protein, like sleep cycles. I'm doing the thing. And so when you're ready to do the thing, you download Holy Habits.
yes, that's because that's going to be the first question most people would ask anyway. Oh, there's, they both have they're both Catholic. Yes, yes, and no. There's really, it's the idea of serving two different audiences. And we have this weird thing in the Catholic sphere where if somebody kind of has a foothold in an area, we're kind of like, all right, well, he does that, so I don't want to get involved in that either. When it's like, no, there's plenty of room. I mean, for goodness sake, there's like a gazillion Catholic YouTube channels with guys
Yeah.
going to talk about the same thing.
Ye-
So it's good that there's additional apps, so that way if you started on another app, and not saying anything negative about it, but eventually, like anything else, you might have gotten all out of the sponge that you could get. Now you have some place to go instead of being stuck, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, that's really interesting how you described and called that dynamic out because I'm part of some of these Catholic business networks and we all kind of joke about there's just a certain weird thing in the Catholic space that you don't see in the secular space. And yeah, it is partly this kind of sense of like, oh, well, I'm the first person to solve this problem, so I guess I planted the flag. You have to go somewhere else, kind of thing. And then there's also this other dynamic where it's like, hey, we're all serving the kingdom of God, which is great, and so that's good. But then, to what extent is there competition versus collaboration versus, it gets pretty fuzzy, right? And then, coming from my the Wall Street background, where I mean, people would just like, you expect people to like crush you, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the Catholic space, it's this weird thing where you're trying to figure out like, who am I co-pushing the kingdom of God with, and who is pretending to do that with me, but is actually wants to stab me in the back, right? Now, I'm not saying anything like, first of all, and so no one's confused. I love the Hallow guys. I'm not talking about them, but I'm just saying there's other elements where you in this Catholic world where it becomes a little fuzzy, right? Who's playing what game,
Yeah. Yeah, I can give you a firsthand example. I, as a firearms instructor, as a guy who's in that gun space, I wrote the book The Armed Catholic. I was out doing it in 2022, kind of going around pitching things. Come to find out, Joey Olivo, who does the Council of St. Michael with me, he's been out there doing it for a decade. And now the guys at AB, they started a show a couple weeks, a while back, talking about the same subject. And there's this kind of rush, and it's just instinctive, because I think it's the way the culture teaches us to do it. Like, we have to pick one, like, oh,
Mm.
this is our Yankee, or this is our Red Sox, or this is our Ford, or whatever. And the guys on AB were very nice. They brought me on Monday. We had a good talk on there, and I told them both, listen, you guys have an open invitation on mine. And I think the idea is we need more cross collaboration. And even back when I worked on Catholic radio, there was always this idea of like, listen, we got to support Catholic businesses. We got to
Mm.
really make, other denominations, Jews, Amish, whatever, they make it a point to specifically support
Oh yeah,
members of their own communities.
that's
And
right.
when we talk about it as Catholics, and we're really good at talking about it, like, we're
Oh yeah,
really good at
Catholics
talking
love to
about it.
talk. Yeah.
But when it comes to it, it's like, yeah, I know you have this streaming service, or this, that, but the YouTube's easier to use, or whatever the case may be. And it's very hard to kind of, the popular phrase, unite the clans, or bring people under this idea of supporting Catholics, and so forth. And it's an interesting dynamic, no matter what sector you're in, business wise. And it's this tough thing that we have to navigate between, like, yes, we want to make sure we can provide for our families and take care of it, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we're, like you said, what's the focus? The focus should be, God and the faith, and pushing that out to the front. And it's an interesting dynamic that if you're not in any of the businesses, whether it's like a secular business, that, or like a physical business like you've been in, or you now doing the technological side, or if you're in like a podcast space, or if you're doing training like I am, it sounds great on the outside, but it is a fickle animal when you actually try to get into the actual world of it. And it's not, I don't think it's anybody's fault. I just think we have that nature. And I'm not, once again, like, I'm not calling anybody out specifically. it's just an interesting dynamic that if you're not behind the curtain, it's very interesting to try to figure out.
Yeah, well, and what you saying how other groups do that, yeah, you said Jews, Amish, I mean, and then Mormons as well. And people have pointed that out too. What's interesting though, now that you're saying this, is perhaps if the Catholic space struggles more with this strange, like hard to explain phenomenon of like spiritual sabotage. In fact, it kind of makes sense because we have the truth. So it makes sense that the enemy is going to throw a little more confusion our way, is going to throw a little more of these things. So it kind of makes sense that we would see that in the Catholic space. And I think part of that is a scarcity mentality of thinking that the pie is limited. Like here's the Catholic world, and the more people get in there to try to influence the Catholic world, it's going to be tug of war. But like what we're hopefully we're actually making the pie bigger, right? I mean, and a lot of that relies on the providence of God as well. And so I think to that point, I'm excited to see the potential resurgence in evangelization, because not to blame an entire generation, but at this point it's become like a cliche or meme, but boomer Catholicism really handicapped Catholicism in modern times, and I think we're trying to kind of restart the engine here more aggressively. So I think we're just experiencing some of that tension and working through those kinks.
Yeah, I think that's actually, at least in the West, we're experiencing this restart, like you were saying, because you did have that, and I'm not calling it anything out. I'm using it as a historian, as a historical benchmark, ladies and gentlemen. That Vatican II precedent on down, and that generation that was so involved in the implementation of it. And if you look at it from a historical aspect, ladies and gentlemen, the radical change that took place in just the way things were done, and there's this kind of stubbornness in that, well, we're going to stick with this because this is ours, versus newer generations that are seeking something different, seeking a connection to something that these platforms, a lot of them, don't offer. And it's interesting, when the technological space came in, the explosion in searching for that alternative kind of is gone through the roof. And it's in the Catholic world, the Catholic Church, the hierarchy never understood the power of social media. But I mean, like, in a lot of things, like the Vatican just changed its website like 6 months ago, so that doesn't really shock me.
Yeah.
It doesn't shock me, but it allowed for this, and whether it's good or bad, I'm not making a judgment, but allowed for all these individuals to kind of come out and stake these areas, and that's allowed for this difference of opinion, whether people think it's a good or a bad thing. But we are seeing those locked horns between people who adapted and accepted the faith before the technological revolution, that is the internet, versus those after. And that
Yeah.
could be even cradle Catholics like myself. I mean, I was born a cradle Catholic,
Mm.
but I didn't have a harder version until 2016. So I
Okay.
was
Oh,
I was
same
living,
years.
yeah, I was living worse than you. I mean, you were a Protestant, but I was actually baptized doing some awful things
Mm.
under the guise of the faith, which is, if you read St. Thomas Aquinas, it's not going to be great for me in the end. But either way, thanks be to God, and nothing. I was able to come back to the faith. But you have this pre-technology versus post-technology gridlock, for lack of a better term, where both sides don't really want to give any ground, if any of that makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. It does make sense. And not to overextend the technology thing too much, but on Twitter, on X, maybe you've seen it on the Protestant side, they celebrate Reformation Month, October, or deformation, right? We don't agree with the term of Reformation, but and Tyndale, Wycliffe, what about all the Bibles that in the Catholic Church getting in the way? And some people point out how in France, the Council of Toulouse, where the Catholic Church prevented laity from the Bible locally, just in that region, because there were some charismatic heretics who had the Bible and they were deceiving a lot of people, so they had to stop on it. So my point there, I know it's a little broader than
Hmm.
this recent modern period, but recently what's been on my mind is this shift of like when information used to be gate kept, pre-libraries, pre-internet, pre-printing press, like 90% of the world illiterate, to have access to ideas and things, right? It was very like there's a funnel. And then everything blasted open. And even now at the internet, I mean, we can access whatever information we want. Whatever I'm curious about, bam, I can get it. And all my life, I've thought this is so great, and of course it still is. I mean, we're talking right now, but then now I'm also starting to realize the downsides of that. I mean, one, of course, is that just because I can get access to any information doesn't mean I'm prioritizing and focusing on what I should be. And it's not necessarily helpful that the average individual can confuse themselves with all sorts of nonsense, as opposed to if you have like a flow of information that's more reliable, be based on authorities you can trust. But of course, from the American spirit, let's say the idea of trusting authority itself becomes suspect, right? And so we've kind of rejected, in the same sense of like if you have a father, an absent father, a father that was bad, it just becomes hard to trust authority. And that's also why a lot of people reject the Pope in the Catholic Church as well. And I know I'm kind of weaving a lot of different threads here, but that's just how my brain works. And
Well, it's great.
Said that, so yeah.
Well, I mean, we can continue on about that. The idea of, and that's kind of when I make that joke that I'm kind of a medieval Catholic, because I don't try to get involved in the day-to-day stuff. Like the recent string of televised interviews from Pope Leo the 14th. There was
Right.
the first one that everybody agreed was kind of a flub because he kind of went really in on something. And then there was this next one
the pro-life one was
the
the first
pro-life
one?
versus you can't be pro-life and pro-death penalty, which a couple other popes are like, yeah, I don't know about that. But and then you had this recent one where it was like essentially no comment. And when Pope Leo was elected, I thought it was going to be a little bit different than Francis, because I was telling people, listen, he's a lawyer, he's a mathematician. These type of people don't make statements unless they run through everything top to bottom. And I think, even despite those things being true, I think when you are in an age where no matter what you say, it's going to be construed differently by political parties, different, sects, and whatever the case may be, to push narratives. That's why I tell people I love the Holy Father. I don't care what he says in an interview. It doesn't bother me. I know there are people that live and die by what he says, but I just find it too much of a roller coaster for me, and can be tiring for a lot of people when it comes to the faith. Trying to parse out every single thing he says. So I think that's a great example of having access to things that previous generations never had access to.
Yeah, well, yeah, you're right, because we wouldn't even see these other statements of a pope on the street saying something per se. Yeah, that's interesting, because I have the same feeling as you, where like I don't really care. I mean, and maybe because and I mean, for you it's like a reversion, and for me a conversion from Protestantism, but I already accepted that in history, like to be a Catholic, you accept that in the past there were some really bad popes, where it's not even like misinterpreting them. What did they mean? What are they saying? Like, no, they were just like, they did some bad things. Their harems, their whatever, theft, like whatever they were doing. And so I already know my personal Catholic faith is not falsified by the actions of a pope. I mean, even St. Peter wasn't impeccable.
Nope.
So I find myself just not caring. But then I see other Catholics really caring, and then almost thinking it's like a purity test. Like, you should care what the Pope is saying. Otherwise you're not as intensely Catholic or something. I don't know. I'm like, should I care more? I don't know. I mean, look, I get it that I understand that some people want to see an icon of leadership that they can follow, and so I get it if they're not having the representation they want of the things that they care about through the global voice that I get that, but it's just not. I don't put that level of care as like the ultimate thing that I'm going to care about as a Catholic. I'm gonna,
let me I just want to cut you off because I'm going to forget the question.
yeah,
As a former Protestant, now Catholic, I think there's a certain group of Catholics, especially on social media, that are watching these things, because as soon as this happens, they'll get a Protestant they're usually debating, or from somebody at work or something like that,
yeah.
that'll say, see, your Pope he's a pro-immigrant, grifting, NGO, blah 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 blah, and you're going, not today, Timmy. Right? I just got into work. Right? Let me sit down and put my coffee down before we start this. But as a Protestant, as a former Protestant, sorry, I don't even say,
Yeah.
as a former Protestant, you have a unique insight into the way that a statement, even an innocuous statement by the Holy Father, can just be triggered and be twisted by so many different people. And that's why there's some people are on guard, because they're just, especially post Francis, where it seemed like every time the guy spoke, people were ready at the keyboard being like, listen, it's not really what he has to say. And they had a
Pope
pre
splaining.
responses ready to go. So if you want to just, if does that
Yeah.
make any kind of sense, if you want to speak to that?
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a couple of layers where, yeah, if you want to like help calm somebody down. So um they'll say, "Oh, did you hear what the Pope said? That this thing, oh, it's so bad, it's so bad." Step one is to point out to them, well, I mean, let's say they supported Donald Trump, right? So
Mhm.
step one is to say, well, hold on, the media is terrible. I mean, you could even, I mean, heck, you could be a Democrat, I guess, too, right? But the media really lies about the people on the right. And so to say, well, that there's always a gap between how it's presented and what was actually intended. So let's just acknowledge that, and maybe we can understand, give benefit of the doubt. There's another way of understanding this. And then let's just say, even after all of the benefit of the doubt, if there's still some problematic thing remaining where it's like, I still don't really like that. Well, then it's like, yeah, like how much does it matter? I mean, we know St. Peter not only denied Christ, but after he was Pope, he had to get called out by St. Paul for being hypocritical with the way he was behaving with the Jews versus the Gentiles, kind of being exclusive, even though St. Peter's teaching was never corrupted. His actual infallibly declared teaching wasn't. And so it's like, this concept of infallibility, I mean, it's just kind of silly. And I guess as a Protestant, I thought too that somehow the Pope has this glowing aura where like it comes out of his mouth and somehow it's the heavenly speech, like opens the curtains, the window, the fresh air hits, and then whatever he proclaims on the square, like that's it. It's the word of God coming out. Like, no, that's absurd, right? It's
Yeah.
infallibility is something that happens very rarely in very specific circumstances. Does the magical speech or the inspired speech of clarification actually happen? In the rest of it, on the one hand, it's just like it's another dude. Now, at the same time, it's not just another dude. It's our Holy Father. He has authority in the same way we respect the president. He has the office of the presidency, whether you like whoever the president is or not. So don't get me wrong. He's not just another guy, but in another respect, he is another guy. Like he's not, he shouldn't make or break your personal faith.
Yeah, that's something a lot of people seem to, and I think that's, you mentioned the president, especially for Americans, because we've become so focused on, even though we're supposedly, not having a king, we essentially have elected kings, and we kind of look to that one person every 4 or 8 years to fix. I think we have the same problem as Americans. I don't know the rest of the world, but as Americans, we look to the Pope. We don't look to our priests, bishops, or any of these other. We look to them as sub to the Pope. Oh well, the Pope said it, so it doesn't matter what our bishop says or whatever these other kinds of things. When really our bishop has authority over our diocese and so forth. And it's interesting how the American dynamic, we
Mm-hmm.
we rebel against authority, yet we always seek approval from authority. We're always trying to get
That's
approval for,
interesting.
right? We want our Pope to affirm our pro-life stance. We want our Pope to affirm our pro-immigration stance. We want our, just we want that affirmation. Well, you can find it in St. Thomas. You can find it even in the Catechism. These beliefs that are more traditionally right wing are affirmed in the Catechism, but
Right.
we
Right.
just want it. We want to hear it. It's almost more comforting when it's quote unquote our guy saying the things that we like. And I think that's that's a trickle down from, all right, well, our state representative tells us what we like to hear, and our governor tells us or doesn't, and it's kind of that weird, wacky dynamic there.
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure. Well, maybe what would be an interesting transition here is, we're talking about people caring what the Pope says, and then say, well, maybe that's not the most important thing. So then it's like, well, what are the more important things we should care about? And for one, it's like, okay, if you have a Catholic who's really angry about Pope said this XYZ, but it's like, okay, Catholic, how angry are you about the mortal sin in your life? Like, are you still committing mortal sin? Like, shouldn't that like really freak you out and make you sweat much more than what the Pope says? Are we loving our wives, our children, the people in our community? Like, what are we really caring about? Am I becoming a saint? Because when I'm at Judgment Day before Christ, and I have to take account of like, here's the decisions I made. I was faced with this fork in the road. I chose that day. The other day, like, we're going to be judged on those works, and part of our alibi is not, oh, well, you should have seen what that other guy did. That doesn't matter, right? So how much, like, what are our real priorities and focus, and are we allowing ourselves to engage in some drama just to alleviate the focus of our own, cleansing and purging and the things that we have to look at in our own life?
Yeah, I think especially with our modern life, we have the ability to deflect, and we have the ability to just distract ourselves from things that are truly important. At the end of the day, whatever happens in the political arena at the federal level, I don't really care about, outside of a
Yep.
couple specific issues. But yet, people will watch Fox News all day, or they'll watch
Yep.
MSNBC all day, or they'll monitor X all day, or whatever the case. They'll bury themselves into that. And there's, of course, something to be said of people who are following news and reporting it. Totally fine, get it, it's fine. But some people who are obsessed about every little thing, and it's just going, take a step back, man. When you think about it, what have you done today? When you do your examination of conscience tonight before you go to sleep, what did what did you do wrong, and how can we reflect on that to be better the next day? Because this hyper unionization, this hyper blob, where we have to be concerned about what happens in every part of this union of states or whatever the case may be, instead of focusing on the family, and really focus. If every single Catholic, especially every single Catholic, just take there, was focused about what was happening in their home and their families, society would be a much better place. Just because that would reflect out. And that's not a judgment on anybody, but I mean, that's what Saint Teresa of Calcutta said. So I'm going to go with what she had to say. I'm going to go with what she said on that, and that'll be my baseline.
That's a great baseline. It's right. It's a temptation for an unhealthy obsession to be preoccupied with what's going to happen next, like out there in society. Like, well, what's going to happen next? Maybe if I just see all the facts and I'm staying on top of it, I'm just going to understand what's going to happen next, which kind of almost sounds like the same spirit that would drive one to, in the past, engage in like divination or reading the stars or trying to predict their destinies, right? And in some sense, it's this curiosity, this control, this relieving my anxiety in some sense, but through trying to get some kind of knowledge that maybe I can't actually get, and or it wouldn't be through the good means of getting it. Whereas what happens next? Well, what about what happens next in my life, and what I can actually influence? Like, what does God want to happen next for me right now? Like, there is something important about today that God wants me to know, and am I checking in with Him? Because every single day, like, God will tell me the thing that's important for that day if I ask Him, right? Am I asking Him, do I really want to know what God wants to happen next for me, like the next action I should take, whatever it is? Am I seeking that out, or am I just more concerned about what's happening next out there?
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. I know Father Rippinger has paid, speeches and speeches where, I ask your guardian angel and things of that nature. And we have access to all this stuff. We have access to all this stuff, Drago. And yet we still find ourselves buried in our phone or buried in the comfort and the supposed quick response, the endorphin rush that technology can give us,
Yeah.
instead of trying to, and it inhibits our ability to reach a different and more spiritual realm, that I could say previous generations had easier access to. Um, because they were able to take their work, they were doing more tactile work. They were doing more things that were involved in nature, farming and things like
Mhm.
that. And they were able to actually see, when I won't speak for you, but I sit at a desk all day. I'm surrounded by one, two, three, four, five, six screens right now.
Lots of experience.
So only four of them work. So it's not that impressive. But the idea is I'm so disconnected most of the day from what's real, right?
Yeah.
I exist in a virtual, in a fake space, which is why, when I go, do rucks and things like that, it's probably the best part of my day because I'm actually out in what God created. And we have that problem where many of us, because of the work environments that are present, call centers, offices, cubicles, the separation from it, it's harder to get to those places that you could argue previous generations, although they struggled and all they had things to do, you could say in some ways they had easier access to the spiritual realm because there were not as many distractions in life.
Yeah, I completely agree. There's, a buddy of mine, actually, Joshua Charles, told me that, and I agree with him. Once he said it, I'm like, yeah, it's obvious that there are more people living in mortal sin today than at any point um, in history, probably. I mean, and even proportionally so, right, as a percentage. And yeah, I think you're right. I mean, now the reason why it feels like, well, but we have some things better. I mean, it's, back to the information thing. Like, yeah, like we can access some of the treasures of the church, some of these beautiful things, better than people could before. But to get through that maze and stay focused is much harder. So it's like, yes, we can unlock uh, and access certain things easier than if we stay focused than other people could in the past. But the journey to get to that extra level is much harder because there's so many distractions. And it would be interesting to see how, when all said and done, and we're in heaven, what God would have to say about the different time periods of when it was easier versus harder to live a holy or spiritual life.
The crazy thing is too is, God and our Lord and Savior knew about every single event, every single action, every single innovation, um, that we would exist and that will come, and we were put here accordingly, to what He wants and His plan and His design. So it's always interesting in that regard. It kind of goes back a little bit to what you were saying before. All right, what do you when I went through some troubled times, 2021, 2022, a lot of mornings it was just, all right, I'm here. What am I supposed to do? Right? What am I supposed to do, God? What am I here for?
Yeah.
Because I don't have an answer for it, and I need you to tell me what am I supposed to do right now? And
Mhm.
sometimes people don't even ask that. They just figure, oh, I'm supposed to do this, I'm supposed to do that, and they kind of assume instead of just ask.
Yeah. And I mean, I've noted, in my life, I think what's sometimes got in the way of me asking is I'm scared of, what if I don't get an answer? Yeah,
What if I get the wrong answer?
it almost feels more comforting to know that God could answer, and I just haven't asked them, but at least I know God could. But it's a lot scarier to go ahead and ask the question and then maybe perceive silence, which then invites me to dig deeper, right? But which, I mean, I understand that now, in a place of greater maturity, that that silence is God calling us into an even greater experience. But without that perspective, the silence, the risk of silence is terrifying, because then you feel like, crap, now I'm alone. I thought I had a ask a friend thing, like in that game
The phone
show.
a friend.
But now that I used my ask a friend and no one picked up on the other side, now I'm like really screwed. So
Yeah, that there is that. There's the problem of, not getting an answer. There's also the fear of getting the answer you don't want. Right?
Yeah.
This, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to ask, because what if I'm asked to do something that I'm not comfortable doing? And I don't want to have to say no. So I just won't.
Exactly.
So it is
Exactly.
that. It's all very interesting. This time period that we're dealing with. And I don't know about you, but I am looking forward to the supposed encyclical on AI from Pope Leo. I think that's going to be generationally defining, because it seems like it's the 800-pound gorilla that society is just waiting to disseminate fully into our society. Right now it's chat GPT, it's some funny memes on X, it's some, it's like a movie clip here and there, but the broad societal impact, most people aren't ready for, if it's going the way that a lot of people seem to think it is. So a lot of us are thinking, well, it would be interesting to see what Pope Leo the 14th has to say about that.
We're cooked is going to be the. Did you read Antiqua et Nova? Did you read that one?
No, I don't really read any of them. I'm not gonna
Okay, that's super important. I talk about, so that one's really good. That was with Pope Francis still here, but that one is really good. So that was with AI, and it talks about the risks. Like, one of the greatest threats is like our anthropomorphization of it. So treating it as if it's an entity, a being. There's some really good stuff in there about how it's not actual intelligence, because the properties of intelligence are more than just that which is calculated or computed. Yeah, there's some really good language. So that one was already phenomenal, and right. Any future encyclical would probably build off of that. But yeah, I'd say, in a very brief way, I would just say that I'm in a strange mindset now where eschatologically, as far as the end, the ends of history, right? I'm definitely like, yeah, like, it's gonna things are about to get pretty wild, but I feel super peace about it, and I'm kind of excited about it. It's kind of weird. Like, who gets excited about an apocalypse, let's say, right?
Yep.
It's a very strange thing. So I don't, but it's more so because we know the end of the story. It's like, you just know that it's like, the movie is coming towards like the later stages of the movie. So, and it's a good ending. So, but yeah, it's 800-pound gorillas, right? I mean, we're in a strange time too, where everyone kind of knows we're going to have such a strong disruption that it's not even like we're going to have to tweak the system to survive. It's like an entire system is going to be replaced. We're just going to have a completely new system and way we structure everything. And, but, we're kind of lulled right now. Like, even though this is literally like could happen by 2030, which isn't that far away. We'll see. I suspect next year, when the college graduates graduate and they're trying to get jobs, that cohort's going to be hit with a really difficult unemployment rate. Specifically, they're like, oh my gosh, that's when it'll start hitting. People be like, okay, crap. And then by 2027, it's, the writing's on the wall for the massive joblessness. Just mentioning one factor. And, then we'll see kind of what happens after that.
Well,
So,
you have executives already saying, "Hey, when we hit the go button, when we actually drop this in, all those entry level jobs that people used to have to, get and rely to start the ladder, those will all be gone. Eventually, most of the jobs that people rely on for income now can be in some shape or form replaced with a form of AI. So it's going to be very interesting to see how a godless society reacts to, because for we want to call it Judeo-Christian or whatever the society, most of the society is godless.
yeah.
And so how a godless society is going to react to this, you culturally destructive force that is unleashed on it, and how do they react to that when those jobless numbers come in, or those, we're seeing it now where people have just quit. People don't even want to be a part of the workforce anymore. They don't want to be anything to do with it, and that's only going to increase as this automation of just life in general is slowly rolled out.
Yeah, yeah. The yeah, so with the entry level being chopped off, it's kind of a weird paradox where you might have like the experienced managers using AI, but how does a person become an experienced manager without going up the ladder? But then if the ladder gets chopped off, and then when the experienced managers kind of retire or pass away, then what? So that would be, that's like a longer term problem with that, but that's kind of interesting. We have to solve for that. um the idea of, hey, everyone just do blue collar stuff, provided, until the robots get involved, right? But robot, that's still farther away. So everyone be blue collar, but it's like, dude, like half the labor force is women. Do you really think you're going to force women to be plumbers and construction workers? I mean, good luck with the motivation for that. um and women, but let alone men, right? Not a lot of men aren't even like aligned, with their interest to be good at that.
Yeah.
Um, and then the other thought that hit me recently, especially in the wake of the Charlie Kirk assassination, the train incident with Arena, right? All these different things, where you see this violence in society, and there's criminals, and then there's also, from the political side, you have the people right now who are causing the destruction, right? Like the destruction of the cities, the loot, or like even the political violence. They're the ones who already, like, they don't care about a job, like they don't have responsibilities, the mom's basement kind of person, right? um
Mm-hmm.
and so what you've had though is, like, let's say the good citizens who are angry, they're like, I don't want my children to grow up in a crappy society. uh I'm getting tired of this. Then there's this kind of like repressed anger, and those people, these citizens, the reason, they have a job right now, they're taking care of the family, they're not going to go on the street, they're not going to like go out there and change stuff, because they just want to, like, take care of their family. But when AI takes those jobs away, I think that's going to unleash this extra surge of energy, and maybe it could be some violent energy as well, where with this anger, which was kind of being held back because people want to be responsible citizens. Well, if you don't have a job anymore, some people are now going to, reaction, they're going to be reactionary, and we'll see some of that. And so I think, I mean, especially, I'd be curious your take on that too, because, given your experience with firearms, and thinking about more concretely about pragmatic situations of safety and danger, that I think that could be another factor that's going to come in big.
Yeah, it definitely has the indicators. I don't want to go on record
Sure.
and say anything will or will not happen, but there's definitely indicators that when you already have generation of military age men who feel there is no hope. Then when you throw in the factor of people who had something, even if it wasn't much, but they had some semblance of a normal routine and a grasp of the American dream, when that's taken from them, it's going to be, which is why, governmental entities have this issue. How do you roll it out? Do you roll it out slowly and people can kind of adapt to it like frogs in a pot of water, or do you
Yeah.
just turn the lights on one day and say, all right, y'all shocked, and eventually you get used to it? So it's
The
going to be
COVID
interesting.
style.
Yeah,
Wake up,
right.
you can't go
Yeah,
outside. Or whatever it
I
was.
mean, they if you look at it that way, they did do a test run that way, and the population was most of the population was pretty subservient to
That
it.
was scary. That was a scary
No.
time.
So it really depends on factors of where you live, who's your governor at the time, your political system at the time, red, blue, whatever the case may be. How much, like, I know where I'm from originally, Rhode Island. Rhode Island does not have a lot of economic um, prospects. Texas supposedly has better ones. So if you have better economic prospects in where you live, then that may slowly, it may take a little bit longer to get through these kinds of things. So there's a lot of questions that can happen then. And then, of course, if you're saying there is a movement towards a violent option, we're already seeing people freak out at an extension of government authority now. how would the public react to a future, crackdown, lack of a better term, of people who just feel like they have nothing, and those are the most dangerous people out there.
Yeah, and for the record, because people have different personality types here, even when it comes to tackling these tough issues. So you and I are comfortable discussing this, but for other listeners who might get uncomfortable and feel, oh my gosh, oh, what's the scare? I can't listen to this. Like, just to be clear, like trying to describe or predict cause and effect, right, of like what seems like could happen. It's not saying we want it to happen. It's not saying I hope this happens. Like, not at all. But in the same way, I mean, I even think Father Mike said this once, that prophecy isn't necessarily like seeing the future. It's more like just understanding the cause effect principles that are currently at play, and just literally the necessary consequences of what's going to play out. And sometimes they killed the prophets, right? Because people just don't want to hear it. But all this to say, I mean, not to say that my prediction or your prediction is right and binding, but the point of this is, how can you, going back to the family unit, what can you do to prepare your loved ones, your spouse, your children? How can you foster an environment that's going to protect them from some of these new dynamics that are going to emerge?
Exactly. And it seems to be a point that a lot of Catholic men are starting to realize that needs to be addressed, because for so long we've been in such a state of comfort and convenience. And
Yeah.
now the writing's starting to be on the wall that, hey, that comfort and convenience is probably not going to be around in a couple years.
Yeah.
So you need to get ready for it. And there's a lot of good Catholic men out there that are taking up the call, and there's a lot of Catholic men that are just sticking their head in the sand and like, you know what, we've had these factors on the wall before and we've come out of it. I'm just going to assume that we're going to come out of it again. So it's really up to the amount of prudence that you want to practice in regards to taking these factors in, looking at them, saying, okay, well, this is this could possibly be something, and trying to adapt from that.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting way to look at,
For sure.
because you're right. Nobody knows the future. Only God knows the future. And some people are like, oh, you're doom scrolling or whatever the case may be. Hey, all I'm doing is just theoretically just playing out events. And if anybody's ever listened to my shows, there's high probability I'm wrong. So maybe the best thing you want to hear is me saying these things, because that's probably means it's not going to happen. But the idea is that you just want to. I think for men, it's even more incumbent upon us to even just kind of play these scenarios out in our head, so that way we're ready for them when the time comes, if they come.
Well, to that point too, by when enough people play those scenarios out, it actually could lead to a constructive thing where you actually avoid the terrible thing, because now we're shining a light on it, and so now we become productive. But it's when you ignore and engage in naivete and willful ignorance, that's when the real problems happen. Which again, back to the family unit. I mean, people have been in difficult relationships, difficult situations with difficult family members. And that when people pretend like nothing bad's going on, that's when it gets worse. So it's and that's tough. That's a broader psychological thing, but yeah.
It is. So we're coming up to the end of the interview. I just want to, nice question to kind of end it off. Now, when you came into the faith, there's usually a saint that guides everybody. Even for me, it was Saint Joseph. He kind of led me back. What's the saint that stuck out to you or reached out to you on the start of your journey back to or journey to the faith?
The saint right now for me is Saint Joseph. So I did the Saint Joseph consecration a couple months ago. It turns out I was born on Saint Joseph the Worker Day.
Oh.
I also grew up in Saint Joseph County, South Bend, Indiana. So I have to give my props to Saint Joseph now, and in hindsight, he was always there. At the start of my journey, because I was a Protestant, I was really uncomfortable with the saint stuff. So I didn't let myself open up to that until maybe like 5 years ago. But I will say, early on, Saint Gabriel, who delivers the knowledge, the announcements. Obviously Saint Thomas Aquinas, Saint Augustine, as far as the meat, and then Saint Jose Maria Scriva, as well, with Opus Dei and building the habits, the holy habits. So I know that's not just a single saint, but that's kind of been some of my influence.
Oh, we all have multiple. I've got a list of like 10 deep. So it's just, that's a great thing. We have access to a lot of them. You should use as many of them as possible at all times.
Yeah.
Before we let out of here, if you want, you've got a bunch of different things that I'd like the audience to know about. Obviously, you can go on X. Holy Habits and like I said, it'll be linked in the description box down below. Holy Habits app. You can follow that on X. You can also find him on a bunch of different places if you want to let everybody know where they can find you.
Yeah, on X, I mean, if you enjoy these kind of conversations like what we're doing here, follow at Drago Dimitrov. It's my name, and you can see what we're doing. My Substack is linked on there as well. If you like deeper essays, I just published a new argument for God, which I'm really thrilled about. I enjoyed that, and and then really just download Holy Habits. I mean, I know we didn't talk too much about the specifics there, but just take a peek. There's some really transformative features there. It's like your spiritual journey on an app, super personalized. It's not a one size fits all, but it becomes very tailored to your specific situation, the thing that you're struggling with, the growth area you want to focus on. And so we've had a lot of excitement. You can look at the reviews on the App Store. And we hope we can be helpful in any way with your journey.
Definitely check it out, folks. Give it a test run. I'm sure you're going to love it as much as I am. So I want to thank Drago for hanging out with me here on the latest episode of Rickcast Interviews. We will talk to y'all next time. God bless and Viva Cristo Rey.
God bless.